This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the In Focus podcast. I'm your host, G. Sampath. After battling insurgency for 13 years, the Bashar al Assad regime in Syria has collapsed. Assad and his family have fled to Russia where they have been given asylum. An Al Qaeda affiliate that today goes by the name of Hayat Tahrir al Sham or HTS has taken control of the Syrian capital Damascus. And there are reports that HTS, an organization that was banned in the US and the UK as a terror group, has captured power in Syria with the military backing of Israel, Turkey, the United States, and the Gulf states. The immediate future of Syria now depends on the leader of the HTS, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, a man who had been handpicked by Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to establish a branch of the ISIS in Syria. So, what were the factors behind the sudden overthrow of the Assad regime, something which not many had foreseen? What are the implications of this development for Russia and Iran, the two biggest backers of the Assad regime? And what are the implications for the various minorities in Syria, such as the Shias, the Christians, and the Syrian Kurds? We unpack the complicated geopolitical scenario in Syria in this episode of In Focus. And we have with us Iftikhar Gilani, a senior journalist who has reported for 3 decades from South Asia and the Middle East and is currently based in Ankara in Turkey. Iftikhar, welcome to In Focus. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Sampath.
So, Iftikhar, to start with, I was wondering if you can quickly take us through the recent events, the chain of events, how the rebel forces advanced so rapidly from, I think, the fringes of Aleppo to the heart of Damascus, the Syrian capital. How do we understand the fact that they faced almost no resistance from the Syrian army?
Definitely, Israel's war in Gaza and Lebanon played its part, but had some deeper reasons also. It was actually on November 15th, to be precise, that it was noticed that Hezbollah, which had outposts near Aleppo, were vacant. Perhaps their fighters had been recalled to Lebanon, where Hezbollah had taken a hit. The US backed Syrian Democratic Forces, which includes Kurds actually, they had marched and taken over these posts. These Kurds, you must be knowing that groups that led by YPG are deemed anti Turkey, and Eastern Turkey, they are fighting Turkish forces in the name of the PKK. So the Syrian National Army, which is also the coalition of many opposition groups and is backed by Turkey, and one of the major groups which you mentioned about the HTS is one of the major group in this alliance. They were told to expel this YPG or SDF from these outposts. They did so on November 25th and 26th, but they found there was no resistance on the other side. There was no Syrian army was not available, was not visible at all. So they took over, they marched towards the city of Aleppo, and then while marching towards after they taking over the Aleppo, while marching towards the Hama city, Syrian Russian air forces did bomb them and tried to prevent the march. But on ground, there was no resistance. It was a copycat what happened to Afghanistan without firing a bullet when Taliban had knocked on the doors of Kabul. So there are reports, or for one last 1 year, the Syrian army had not been paid, or they were paid intermittently. It was actually Hezbollah fighters who had kept the Assad government on oxygen. And another factor which actually played a part was that when China acted to reconcile between Iran and Saudi Arabia with Russian consent, their second target was to do a similar reconciliation between Syria and Turkey to put America in much more to actually do something, demoralize America's interests in the Middle East. But Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan traveled twice. Intelligence Chief Ibrahim Kalin held talks in Damascus, I think 4 or 5 times. We were once told the dates of Erdogan's visit to Damascus are being finalized, and Assad was also coming to Ankara quite very soon. Only the dates remain to be finalized. This is where Assad erred, because it angered Putin. Iranians and when you are at a stronger point, Assad was at a very stronger points after he was given an entry into the Arab League last year. So when are you at a stronger point, you should actually try to leverage that on the diplomatic tables, which he didn't do. Iranians past few months were quite also suspicious of Russians who were trying to make some inroads at their cost with Turkey. That explains why Russia didn't come to the rescue as it should have. There are reports that it has taken guarantees from the Syrian National Army that its interests will be protected and its naval base will remain in Latakia. It is same. I think again I repeat, it was the same as in Afghanistan where US pulled out from supporting the Ashraf Ghani government and then it collapsed. The same almost happened in.
So, Iftikhar, you just said that Russia had taken guarantees from the Syrian National Army that its base in Latakia would be protected. But the Syrian National Army is itself a coalition, right? I mean, it's a coalition which includes the likes of HTS. So, who would Russia have had to talk to get this kind of a guarantee? Who would it needed to talk to?
They actually right now actually everybody knows who supports whom. So Russia quite very well they need this. They they need that. They had to support. They had to actually talk to the Turkey and get these guarantees, and that's what exactly is believed, that they had got guarantees that their bases will not be targeted, their base will remain intact, and they will have a role in the middle, because it was when the Russia entered into the Syria, that was something which was something very big, that Russia entering into the Middle East. That is and that role will continue, and that works for these external forces also, including Turkey, and it may it may actually interest the new government also in Syria, because they need some support of some superpower. They need somebody to put somebody over there.
Right. So the whole thing began with, I mean, as you said, Hezbollah feeling the requirement for its fighters who had been stationed in Syria. So once it came to the knowledge of, I think, Turkey and other maybe NATO allies that their posts were vacant, so the SNA wanted to launch some kind of a offensive against the SDF, which is a Kurdish forces in Syria. And when during the course of this offensive, they discovered that the Syrian National Army, as in the actual Syrian army of Assad, was not actually in play at all, and therefore they decided to make use of this opportunity and go all the way to Damascus. Is that the right?
Exactly. Past few days since Sunday, there has been some the briefings, some background briefings, some on-record briefings, whatever they are from Ankara to Damascus or some. They actually, the one point they said that they had no idea that these bases had this is they will not face any resistance of in the Aleppo. The Turkey's primary interest was to get these Hezbollah posts cleared from the Syrian Democratic Force, because for Turkey this Assad was not as important. Assad was not as enemy, or Assad was not as threatening for them as this SDF, which they perceive. Because the SDF is in the SDF's one branches, that is PKK. They conduct operations inside Turkey. So Turkey had an issue with this more than the Assad. So their first primary interest was to get these bases cleared from the SDF. Not they didn't had much, but when they did, when this they Syrian National Army, they discovered this that there is it's all the vacant ground, so they kept on marching. And one another thing is that, which is also coming out here in the media, or is coming out in the briefings, is that 6 months ago in June, actually the Syrian National Army had actually made plans to invade Aleppo. They thought that this Hezbollah is right now busy in Lebanon, and they have already opened a front with Israel, so they will be quite weakened and they can take up Aleppo. But at that time, it is said that the powers which back them in the region, they prevented them from doing so, that lest they get a blame that they have worked or taken something at the behest of Israel. So at that time they had actually prevented them from marching. But this time actually it happened so, and the things started
No, it's very
going.
interesting, Iftikhar, that you mentioned that they were prevented from doing this offensive on Aleppo in June because they might be perceived as acting at the behest of Israel. But now the same kind of allegations are being made against Erdogan and Turkey, because they are saying that what has happened in Syria is exactly what Israel wanted. I mean, Assad's regime was a single big factor in ensuring that the supplies for Hezbollah were able to come from Iran. Syria was a crucial transit point, and Assad was crucial to all any kind of Palestinian resistance, be it supplies and support for Hamas or for Hezbollah. Now with Assad gone, it is seen as a big setback for Palestine, which is what Netanyahu wants, and which is exactly what, in this case, Erdogan has also achieved. So seems to be some kind of a convergence of interests between Netanyahu and Erdogan here, and this flies in the face of the kind of rhetoric we've heard from Erdogan, which is like very strongly condemning condemnation of whatever has been happening in Gaza. So how do the Turkish establishment see this contradiction?
Not necessarily there had been any contract or there had been any plan actually to actually a plan or not necessarily that there had been a kind of a collaboration or between Israel and Turkey in the sense to actually dislodge Assad. But exactly if the things which actually panned out, and sometimes many people they say that they panned out so automatically that they went out of their hands on from 27th of November onwards. Things went out of their hands, and there was nothing that nobody could have actually prevented those things to happen. But on the larger framework, when you see the two countries which actually got strategic advantage after what happened in Syria are Israel and Turkey. That is definitely they got advantage, but not necessarily that it had been a planned or it had been with
No,
a
no, no. You're,
collaborate.
you're saying that yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that it's not planned or as such, but it happened maybe automatically or as a matter of coincidence. But others have also pointed out that this entire offensive, the latest rebel march towards Damascus, it started after the ceasefire. They could have done it. They could have started before the ceasefire, but they had to wait once the ceasefire with Hezbollah was in place, so that people don't connect. That they are doing this to sort of cut down Hezbollah. So that is another connection which is being made. I'm just sort of
No, actually,
putting
the
it there.
Assad was quite very overconfident, and had he actually heard what his own allies were telling him, the Russians were telling him, or the Chinese were telling him, he would not have got into this situation where he is right now. Had he actually, because ultimately he was at a very high point. He got a membership back in the Arab League, so he was actually making it nobody can actually now dislodge him. Everybody in this region had actually made up this mind that it is not possible to dislodge Assad. So when you have this kind of a strength, so you should use your strength to achieve something on the diplomatic tables. He didn't actually return to the diplomatic table. He continued what he was actually doing. If he had actually, but what exactly Turkey was
I
actually
mean,
telling him.
what do you mean by coming to the diplomatic table? Diplomatic table with whom?
Actually, the most important for him was to come onto the diplomatic table with Turkey, because if he had come to the Ankara, or he had allowed the Erdogan to visit Damascus, so what had actually happened? They had only one point. What Turkey was actually asking him. One point was they wanted their eastern borders. They wanted some guarantee for the eastern borders, and which Russia was actually willing to provide, but they needed a consent from the Bashar al-Assad, and it could have happened only when there could have been a summit level meeting with the Bashar al-Assad. But he went to Kahira, he went to the but he didn't actually had that, because he thought that Arab world is now with him, so he has nothing to bothered about. So that is exactly why he has erred, and that actually paid him quite.
No, but what did he stand to lose by giving this guarantee to Turkey? Like, what was he?
That is exactly that is nobody knows actually why actually he actually kept on delaying. He kept on conditions. One condition was that Turkey should first stop their support to the Syrian National Army. Turkey should vacate. But that is what exactly he had to discuss with the Turkey in return what he can give to Turkey. That's what he didn't do. It when you come onto the diplomatic, when you are this is a lesson for not only for everybody. When you are strong, you should use that levers, come to the diplomatic tables and make the other party to agree with their strengths, make them agree to your points with using your strengths. He didn't use his strength which he had achieved for last 2 3 4 years, and actually settle the issue. because this Syrian National Army, after all, they are the Syrians. They have a backing from the outside. So every group actually in Syria, which is right now contesting, everybody has a backing from some force or other force. But this one, that this that it could have given a quite a message to the United States and US, maybe that some behind the scenes somewhere somehow, this maybe somebody had actually given him a wrong advice, and he actually acted upon those advice. Even Iran quite very, not with so strongly as Russians or Chinese, but they had also been advising him, particularly when the new regime in Iran took over, to do something with Turkey. And that actually could have been, that could have been done quite very easily.
Right. Now, Iftikhar, I mean, Assad is now fled Syria, but he was, I think, the last of the Arab nationalist leaders, to have been deposed in the Middle East. Now, they're no more, none of them are left. So, how do you understand the implications of this for the rest of the Arab world?
Unfortunately, Arab nationalist governments in the Middle East have become less prominent compared to their peak in the mid 20th century. But some governments still remain, they have this elements of Arab nationalism in their political ideology, like the Egypt, Tunisia, and Iraq. But the pan Arab nationalism has shifted to local nationalism. After this Arab Spring, Tunisia and Egypt had got Islamist governments, but they disappeared quite very. No, they didn't. Almost in Egypt, it disappeared quite very soon, and Tunisia, it took almost a decade to disappear. But they were replaced by the local nationalism. Something may happen in Syria as well. The dominant group in this SNA, Syrian National Army, or the Free Syrian Army, is HTS, which is an Islamist group. But it's still very difficult to predict what future Syria may take. Maybe the Syria may also, they may also opt this local Syrian nationalism. But there are quite forces, quite which the US particularly, they have been actually insisting that the new arrangement in Syria should be a regional arrangement. All the regional forces should have some autonomous regions, which the Turkey is opposing quite vehemently.
What do you mean by regional arrangement? What kind of a regional arrangement?
Like they want to give a regional, like Latakia area, that area to Alawites, to give them a regional administration, their autonomous regional administration, as they did in Iraq. And this eastern part give it to the Kurds, make them, recognize their autonomous. There is already, they have an autonomous area, to recognize that autonomous area. But for Turkey and for other players, they around the Syria, they like Jordan, and they want a united Syria, which has a very controlled from Damascus and has a very firm control in Damascus. So they don't want these regional factions. They don't want these regional administrative areas, as in Iraq. US had done. So US has been pushing for that, but I think the regional players around the Syria, they may not agree to this.
By regional players, you only mean Turkey, right? Who else is opposed to this?
Turkey, Jordan also, and many other Arab countries are quite opposed to it, because this is actually the Arab versus Kurd, Arab versus Sunni versus Alawite things are also playing it up. So these Gulf countries, they will not want an Alawite regional force in Syria, and Turkey will not want a regional autonomous Kurd region in Syria.
Right, quite a lot of ethnic factions at play here. Iftikhar, it has also been reported, the HTS, which is now in charge of, I think, the center of the country. It is backed by Israel, Turkey, US, the Gulf states, with the objective of toppling the Assad regime for quite some time. And they probably didn't expect it to happen so suddenly and so swiftly, but that was the broad objective, for backing HTS. And the reason for that was that they wanted to weaken Hezbollah and Iran by cutting off their supply routes through Syria. So, can you talk a little bit about, now that their objective has been achieved? What are the interests of each of these powers, Israel, Turkey, US, and the Gulf states, vis-a-vis the new regime that is now coming into effect in Damascus under the HTS? But I think that the old prime minister is still very much in place, and they are doing some kind of a transition process right now. So, what do these four big powers or power configurations expect from this al-Jolani headed led regime?
This actually, the earlier group which was an affiliate to the Al Qaeda was Jabhatul Nasra in 2011, and when it had melted, so HTS came up in 2017. There were four groups actually which came together and they distanced themselves from Al Qaeda. Thereafter, they had many fights and they were used to clear eastern Turkey from Al Qaeda and ISIS. Although it was actually the Kurds who fought main battles against ISIS, but these groups also fought the battles against both of Al Qaeda and ISIS. And actually, the problem is the Western scholars and the media, they don't differentiate between Al Qaeda, ISIS, Salafists, and the Ikhwan al Muslimin, or the Muslim Brotherhood. This HTS is actually the offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood has a tendency to adopt themselves to the different situations in different streams. Like this, in Egypt they have taken a different strategies, and Tunisia they took a different strategies, and Syria also they have adopted to the post 2017 was something very different. Post 2017, when they cut these actually from the Al Qaeda and from ISIS, because at that time actually there was actually the common ground was actually to overthrow the Assad. But of post 2017, they actually had their own groups, and
But
this
Iftikhar,
Muslim.
there seems to be sort of some kind of a consensus among most analysts that HTS is Salafist and not a Muslim Brotherhood entity.
No, this is actually the Muslim Brotherhood. This is actually there is a very thin line between Salafist and the Muslim Brotherhood. But in they have adopted them. They have adopted the situations in the, like it is a Jamaat Islami in South Asia. The Jamaat Islami in South Asia, Jamaat Islami in Pakistan has adopted to the situation in Pakistan. Jamaat Islami in India, Hind, he has adopted the situations in. For the Pakistani Jamaat Islami, secularism is a abuse. For the Indian Jamaat Islami in India, they had the Forum for Secularism and Democracy. And for Jamaat Islami Kashmir, they adopted the Sufi, local Sufi this culture. So same has actually happened to the HTS also in post 2017, when because it has elements of, because they had been ruling from 2017 to Idlib, so it is not so difficult actually to think, to actually find out or do a research what exactly in post 2017 they did in the Idlib. So their Shura Council, they had members of the from the Sufi backgrounds, and this Fatwa Council also had its elements of the Sufism so they have that's why they are, it's like quite very, it will be quite very better to say that now that they are the offshoots of the Muslim Brotherhood, which keeps on changing their situations. In 2017, actually, the most important actor, which actually was this Turkey, which entered into the agreement with this HTS or Syrian-led alliance, and that allowed Turkish troops to patrol northwest Syria as part of the ceasefire, which was broken through the Astana negotiations. In return, they got arms and training from Turkey. They had been ruling a large part of Idlib, and they had set up the military academies also. Turkey's interest is to, but now the interest in Turkey's interest is to prevent any autonomous region for Kurds, which US had promised them when it brought them to fight ISIS. So because the PKK, which spreads the militant activities inside Turkey, is report they have a sanctuaries in Kurd-controlled Syrian part, which actually Turkey blames quite very often. So in Syria, the region controlled by Kurdish force is commonly known as the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria. It's often referred to Rojava as well.
Yeah, how big is this autonomous area? Is it like a
It is a
significant?
it is very significant. Almost more than 20% Syria is right now with Kurds, and more than 20%. Yes.
So this area is not under the control of HTS.
No, it is not control of the IGS. It is the US forces are in this region, and this region is quite very oil rich region also. But only from yesterday onwards, there had been a demonstration in the Arab areas of this region, because there are some Arab areas also which they are under this Kurdish autonomous region. In Arab areas, there has been demonstrations, and some Manjib, or which is actually on the east of the Euphrates River, they had to vacate that yesterday. So I think so there will be it will definitely going to be a next battlefield. So, but how long? Maybe they may hold on the Kurds area, but there are some Arab areas also around them. So there is a lot of the Arab versus Kurd things are also playing it up. So U.S. interests they have kept changing. But current Biden administration, Obama had promised Kurds a territory. But with Trump now coming, it is very difficult to predict him. But it looks he may orphan Kurdish groups, giving a leverage to Turkey as he did when he was last time in power. So last time also it was in his period when the Kurds invaded and took the land in Syria. So Gulf states had also issues with Assad government, although of late they had warmed to it to keep Turkey in check. For Israel, an unstable region works in its interests, so it will not allow new Syrian dispensation to remain at ease. Only yesterday it annexed the only just 2 days ago it annexed the Syrian territory near the Golan Heights when the Syrian army had melted down.
So, in this context, Iftikhar, I mean, this annexation of Syrian territory near Golan Heights, people are talking about this concept of Greater Israel. Is that something real? Is it something which Israel has talked about, or is this more like a security measure to have some kind of a buffer zone? Because there are, jihadist elements which are in power in Syria. Is it driven by those kinds of considerations, or is there an ideological motive in terms of a Greater Israel, quote unquote, which is at play here?
Exactly, like in the Muslim radicals, they have this idea of the notion of the Khilafat. So has this Israeli rightist groups as well. So in in the Israeli Greater Israel, it actually encompasses the whole of Syria. It encompasses of the eastern Turkey. It encompasses the most parts of the Saudi Arab. It and but the problem is for the Greater Israel, where will they bring the population? The whole of the whole all over the world, Jews are not more than 10 million. So where will they bring what will they do the local populations? Will they drive them out? So it is a kind of an romanticize with this Greater Israel to have this whole Arab, almost half of Arab world they are claiming as a greater Israel. It's as same as the romanticizing the Islamic radicals. Or they romanticize with the Khilafat. So, but right now, actually, the Israel actually the most actually the what exactly Israel wants. He wants to Syria to remain to become defenseless, as it did dates decades back to the Jordan, and Jordan is the safest border currently for Israel. So they know right now that there is no army to confront them in Syria, so they can from for last 3 days, 300 military or airstrikes they have conducted against Syria. So Israeli military has been assaulting Syria for more than a decade, but taking advantage of country's chaos. Israeli sources they say that they are actually attacking to aim to prevent the weapons from falling into the hands of the opposition groups. But going by the behavior of the Benjamin Netanyahu, it looks it is bent to expand or first to expand the conflict to try to involve the US actively in the region and also to make the countries around defenseless. So he can have the he can have the day and he can have the very safe borders for Israel. That is the but for the rightist Israelis, I think the Israelis, this minister Simotrich, he gave a quite interview to a French news channel where he mentioned about that the Israel expansion of Israel to including Damascus. But it will be quite very how the world will take it out and whether it is possible. What will they do the local population and where how many Jews from outside? Most of the almost half of the Jews living in the world they live in Israel. So where they will get more Jews to actually make them to stay in these regions.
Right. I mean, Smotrich's statement is something, quite something. Yes, I mean, it's difficult to say anything more about it. Now, coming to Assad, Iftikhar, I mean, the Assad regime, of course, it was notorious for human rights abuses. That prison in Damascus has been written about. We've seen videos. But at the same time, and one has to also acknowledge that the Assad regime preserved the pluralist character of the nation, the culture, but now with this HTS, which is a completely jihadist Islamist, radical Islamist outfit, with them taking over, what happens to the minorities, the Shias, the Syrian Christians, the Syrian Kurds, and there are other minorities as well. So how will they fare under the HTS controlled regime? Will they? I mean, there were reports of Christmas decorations being torn, and other Christian institutions being attacked, Christian buildings. So what is this going to be, another Taliban kind of a setup, or is it going to be more moderate? What do we know about that?
Exactly. When I was talking to these Syrian refugees at the Syrian Turkish border, everybody had this on top of their mind because the Syrians, they are quite very modern outlook. Had been a quite very secular socialist outlooks. So they had this in the upper post most on their mind. But they were actually they were actually saying that this SNA, unlike Taliban, because Taliban had taken a almost a part of the Afghanistan was under them, but nobody actually knew actually how they were ruling those parts. But here actually how they, because since 2017 they had been ruling the most part of the Idlib province under the name of Salvation Government. So everybody knew here how they have ruled this part of the country. So here for last 2017 they did not impose any codes for the women. So but there are apprehensions. The French colonialists had created a situation where they ignored the majority Sunni population and popped up a faction within Shias, even called Alawites. I think they are 15% of the population. Iranian Shias even do not consider them Muslims. They are highly educated. Assad belonged to this sect. So far, when opposition took over Latika, where Alawites have significant population, so there were reports that there had been some attacks, but who knows what happens in the future. But so far, from the top of the HTS leadership, there has been a message to the ground that nobody should touch anybody. This when they took the Hamas, this Hayat Tahrir Sham, this chief al-Jolani, he went to the church and assured the Christians there that nobody will, they will not be touched. But it is since there is it is a hodgepodge coalition. There are people from the east, there are people from the west, there are people from the some different tribes, different, they have all, everybody has its own interests. How actually they will be, it will play, it is not like Taliban. At least one thing was for Taliban, it was a cohesive force. This is not the Syrian National Army is not a cohesive force, and everybody will have its own revenges to take. And it's very difficult to predict, and it is on top of the mind of everybody, everybody in whom I talk, every Syrian. And but so far it has not been there has not been a chaos, but you can't say there has not, it has been an orderly also. So it is between chaos and not being orderly,
Okay,
right now the situation.
speaking of chaos, Iftikhar, and this hotspot you referred, I just wanted to sort of take you through the number of groups which are currently at play in this very small country. We spoke about the Syrian National Army, which is not the Syrian National Army as in Assad's army. It is the army backed by Turkey and the US, which is the SNA. Then we spoke about the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF, which is said controls 20% of Syrian territory. Then, of course, there is the HTS and its Salvation, whatever government, which was in power in Idlib and surrounding areas, which is now taken over Damascus. Then there is SFA, Syrian Free Army, which is, what about this SFA? I mean, is it part
No,
of this
see,
entire
no,
coalition?
it is part of the Syrian National Army with the HTS. HTS is the major group, and there are so many groups. So they are part of the Syrian National Army, SNA.
What about this SOR, Southern Coalition? Is it also part of this
Yes,
coalition?
they are part of this coalition. So right now, if you can say, there are two coalitions: Syrian Democratic Force and Syrian National Army. So there are two coalitions right now. One backed by Turkey, other backed by the US, and third one has melted. Third one has melted this Assad force.
Okay, okay. So basically, I think Turkey and the US will have to sort of sort out how they divide the spoils, so to speak.
Exactly, they have to actually.
Does Turkey
That's,
control any of the oil fields with its
Turkey does not
proxies?
control oil fields, but they control a significant territory, almost 5% of the border territory in Syria. So that is what exactly this Assad was telling them. They first get clear that territory, and then I will talk to you. And then first stops supporting and sending arms to the SNA. But that is what exactly that he had to discuss it on the table.
Right. So, what are the implications of the collapse of the Assad regime for for these two places, Iran and Russia? Russia, you did mention that they have had some kind of guarantees, but what about Iran? This seems like the worst news of the year for Iran. I mean, their supply routes to Hezbollah has been cut off. They whatever leverage they had with their proxies in Syria, that's gone. So, like, their option now? Will they attempt to regain their strategic influence in Syria by other means? Will they talk to HTS? Like, what can they do now?
It has a very severe implications for Iran, not only in this region. It has a domestic implications for Iran. It has its implications in Iraq as well as in Lebanon. A weaker Syria will have a significant implications for the Palestinians also in Gaza. And it's primarily because Syria had historically been a strategic ally and supporter of the various Palestinian factions and Hezbollah. And for Hamas and Hezbollah, both of whom have perceived political and military support from Syria. Changes in Syrian regime will alter the dynamics of their support network. But Iran, most of them actually, the countries, the Iran is the loser. The axis of resistance has almost gone. It is the Syria, through Syria actually they were supplying arms. They were supplying actually to whatever they had to supply to Lebanon, to Hezbollah, and it's been very difficult now if any regime coming in, and that too a very Sunni regime, they may come to power in the Syria, and they will allow this. Because they have their own axe to grind with Hezbollah. Whatever all sympathies to Hezbollah in Palestine and in the Lebanon, what they are actually fighting for against the Israel, but for in Syria they don't have the majority of the populations which we talk, they don't have a sympathy for the Hezbollah. So it will be very difficult for Hezbollah to keep those routes open, and it will be very difficult for Iran to keep those routes open. So major actually loser has been Iran.
What did you mean when you say it has domestic implications? Implications, Iftikhar?
Domestic implications are for all these years, Iran has been a regional power. Iran has actually boosted that power right from Bahrain up to this crossing to Lebanon. It had created a kind of an axis, and that axis was which actually now this Iran has been through China. The Iran had actually approached to Saudi Arabia, etc. So, but from the Yemen, every country, every Gulf country in their neighborhood had Iran, and now this Iran is gone from their neighborhood. So that is exactly, and every Gulf country has a U.S. military base. So the Iran is out from those military, out of from threatening those military bases. And in Iran had a quite huge stakes, and now it will have a cascading effect on Iran and those are popular resistance forces which Iran was backing in Iraq. So it will be quite it will have a cascading effect there as well. So unless and until now Iran gets something
So,
in
how does
return
this
from the
play out
West.
in Iraq? Iraq is a different country, right? It's not Syria.
Iraq is a different country, but Iran has a quite a say in the government in Iraq. Iran had a say. Last time you saw the government formation, how long it took, just because the Iran was not giving a sanction for those groups to join the government. So, but they have a quite a very big say in Iraq. They have this
So,
popular
how is
resistance.
this Syrian setback going to affect them? How does it? What is the
Yes,
link?
because like in Hezbollah in Lebanon, there is a Hashadul Shabi or the Popular Resistance Forum, which actually fought the ISIS in Iraq. That is backed by the Iran. So they will have the weakening of Hezbollah will mean that automatically the weakening of this Popular Resistance Force as well. So it was actually the Hezbollah was a lead organization, but they had this ancillary organizations in different countries as well. So it will have a cascading effect even in Yemen. In Yemen, whilst also Iran is actually backing their Houthis, so it will have this cascading effects there as well. But unless and maybe under this government, this Iran had been when this new government came up, they had been trying to approach the West, or West had been trying to open the channels. If they get something from the West during the sometime or some days to show their people that they had been still on the picture, or they have been still as a regional power, regional force, unless otherwise there will be some domestic problems also. It will create a domestic problems for Iran as well, because it has taken a quite a big hit.
Right. I mean, that's a very grim scenario for Iran, no doubt about that. One last question, Iftikhar, before we wrap up. So, coming to al-Jolani, who is at the thick of things now in Syria, I mean, what kind of leader is he going to be? And so I don't mean specifically with regard to Syria, but with regard to Palestinians in Gaza and for Lebanon, because Syria has, as you said, as you've established, it's been a big backer of the Palestinian cause, militarily and otherwise. So, and it is an important cause, if not for the governments in the Arab world, but for the people in the Arab world, it is an important issue. So, now that he's going to be in charge, will he? What kind of a stand? Because we know that his outfit has enjoyed the backing of Israel, but there is a sentiment in favor of Palestinians. The Arab sentiment, so to speak, which is an important factor. So, is he going to be like sympathetic to the Palestinian cause in any way, or is this basically game over for Hamas and Hezbollah?
For the time, he will be having his own hands full. So he has to actually consolidate the country. He has to consolidate so many groups within his own alliance, and there will be a power game, who will get what. So he will have a quite his hands will be quite full for the next, I think, many years. But there is a one thing quite common in is Arab world, is that they are sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and Palestine is perhaps the only Arab country which is occupied among the Arab countries, Arab speaking countries. So there is that kind of an and Syria had been actually the more the actually they had to own up the Palestine. They had a history of from Damascus. They have the history of actually the ruling the Palestine. They have the history of actually the aligning with the Palestine, so that they cannot actually just wish away. So in that, but he will be having his own hands full. So Syria will, it's very difficult. He has to first make his own country stable. He has to actually make his own allies first to give them what they want. And there is, it's not that the Assad regime has thrown out and it has gone. So the remnants of the Assad regime, they will remain there. So they will be, and this main issue for him is what to do with the eastern part of the Syria, where the Kurds are located, and they have a US backings, and they have the autonomous region there. And Turkey and other countries, they may be forcing them to actually annex that part, and maybe another bout of fighting may take place that part, that across the river of Euphrates. So he will be quite his hands will be quite very full to actually think of what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Palestine.
Right. One other small question, Iftikhar. What is Russia's game plan going to be from now? Are they going to retain their naval assets in Latakia and on the Mediterranean coastline there, or are they going to withdraw their naval assets and take it back to wherever they want? Like, even if they stay, what is in it for them?
No, that is the having a base in Latakia is quite very important for Russia, because that is the only way they have to the Mediterraneans. Other window to the Mediterraneans for them is via Bosphorus, via this Turkey. So they have the only and they have been given guarantee that this their base will continue. And so they will have now more concentration. They will now have will concentrate now on the Ukraine battle. So from this, since Trump is also now coming to the after January, what exactly will happen is, it is very difficult to predict as such. But there have been some channels of communications between Russia and the coming administration, Trump. So maybe that he will have a full attention towards the Ukraine, and he may get something. What will happen because Russia is more interested right now on the Ukrainian side. But this base is quite very important for them to have an entry into the Middle East. So this they will that's what news is coming or has been reporting, that Russia got some guarantees, and that's why they didn't actually came to the rescue of the Assad the way they should have come.
Right. Thank you so much, Iftikhar. It's been a pleasure listening to you. Speak with so much of historical context, background, and the political dimensions, economics, and everything. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.